Hello and welcome to the RPG Blender, where we give lesser played games and forgotten settings the roll of the dice they deserve. I'm your host, Game Master George, and today we are continuing our look at the books in the Kids on Bikes series. Previously, we've gone over the world creation, how your players will work together in order to generate their unique setting, the character creation, where they'll build not just their sheets, but also their relationships with the other characters, the general rules of the game, which form the backbone of this system, the mechanics that are shared between all of them, and the specific rules, those which make each of these systems unique and help build their individual themes. With those four topics, we've pretty much covered all there is to know about running the games in the Kids on Bikes line. So today, I'd like to just take a moment to talk about some customizations that I have done or would recommend doing in order to make these games pop even more. And then I'll give some of my final thoughts on these systems. What do I like? Where do I feel that it could use some improvement? And how would I personally rank these three games? So if you've enjoyed our series thus far, and would like to stay tuned for our next tutorial series, go ahead and click that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us when we dive into our next system. But for now, let's close out the book on the Kids on Bikes series with Let's Run Kids on Bikes, the final touches. So diving into the customizations, we're going to go through this in the order that I've tackled these individual videos. That will make it easy for you to go back in order to rewatch those videos, or make sure that you are tuned in to the right pages in your own copy of the rulebook. So to begin with, let's talk about world creation. Honestly, the way that these games create their worlds is pretty much perfect. Having your players defining aspects of it gives your players immediate investment in the world that they're about to play in. So as far as mechanical changes go, there's not much that I would recommend here. However, there is one thing that I do recommend, which can make your players even more involved in the creation of this world. You see, when I ran Kids on Bikes, my players answered all these questions about their town, but then I was left to actually map it out. So, if you want your players to be even more involved in this process, make the actual map making part of the world building. Give each one of your players a single sheet of blank paper. They will then draw their individual neighborhood within the town, the place that they live, as well as some of the surrounding streets. They'll map it out, give a couple roads, maybe a few little houses here and there, but in particular, they want to focus on their location within this street. To add a little more to the town development, have them establish one landmark within the town which is in their neighborhood. This doesn't have to be something massive, it could just be a local store. Finally, make sure that they add at least 2 connection points. These will be places where their road extends beyond the borders of their piece of paper. There should be at least 2 of these, and they should be on different edges of the paper. This then comes into play with you, the Game Master, taking their individual sheets of paper and fitting them together. You will then create the connections between them. Some of them may line up nicely and you'll just place their sheets of paper together, but then you will have it all build off of the town center, which you, the Game Master, will create. If your players want to go a little more crazy, feel free to give them extra paper so that they can draw out a larger section of the map, but using just a single one allows them a little bit of investment in the building of the map without being overwhelming to the, people who are lacking artistic skill, like myself. Next up is character creation. With character creation, I've already covered my main customization, and that is the expanded character relationship questions. The core book gives you 3 options on how to ask the questions back and forth between the characters. Myself, I found that there was a way to improve that even further, to build an even more tangled web of relationships between the characters. I already went over this in detail in the original character creation video, so just as a quick summary, each character will decide whether they have a positive or negative relationship with each other character. They will then answer a positive, negative, or don't know question about that character, who will then answer the opposite back. In the event of don't know, they will answer another don't know. This continues until they have answered a question about every single other character, at which point the next player will do so for their character. In the end, every single character will have answered 2 questions about every other character. One based on how they perceive their relationship with that character, and one based on how the other character perceives their relationship with them. These don't need to be the same. One person could really like another character, whereas that character barely tolerates the other. This deepens the web even further, and being perfectly honest, expands one of the best aspects of this game. While the game itself is great, the character relationship questions are what makes this system. Now, the other half of the character creation system is the actual sheets. And honestly, the sheets are so simple that there's very little customization that's needed here. However, the simplicity leads to a bit of a situation, and that is character overlap. There are 6 dice that you are going to assign to 6 different statistics. That leads to 720 different possible outcomes for how your 6 dice will be assigned to those 6 statistics. However, in practice, it's going to be your character's top 2 stats that they're going to be angling to use most of the time. So when we cut that down, assigning those 6 statistics only 2 dice, we have only 30 different combinations. This still seems like a lot until you realize that each 6th of these is going to share the same dominant trait. Compounding off of that, certain traits go better together. So if you have 2 characters that are interested in fighting, it's likely that they're going to both put their d20 into fight, and then their d12 is quite likely going to go in either grit or flight. Moving beyond that, assuming that they are the stereotypical type, they're going to be looking to put their low dice in their mental statistics, probably intelligence or charisma. That's now 4 different stats which are going to have very similar scores between these 2 characters. Now, you could simply say no 2 people may pick the same stat as their top, but that restricts your players a bit more than I'd like. If you have 2 people that want to play fighty characters, let them. But where you can help to differentiate them is with their strengths. I suggest making it so that no 2 players can pick the same strengths or flaws. This ensures no overlap with the special little tricks that your players are able to do. What this also means is that your players should go in a round robin, one person picking, then another, so that everybody has a fair chance to be able to get a trait that they would like. Moving on to the general rules, I have one recommendation that I have used, which I feel greatly expands this system, and that is to remove the upper limit on explosion. Normally, when you are rolling your dice, you can only explode until your roll has met or exceeded the value of the target number. This means that if you have, say, a d4, you will never be able to succeed by more than 3. In my opinion, this kind of flies in the face of one of the other elements that they talk about. You see in the combat section, they talk about how any combat is deadly and dangerous and has the potential of going horribly wrong. However, those people that then have, say, a d4 in their fight never have the chance of actually having that insane explosion which leads to them accidentally doing serious harm to another character or NPC. By removing that limit, you make it again possible for that weak character to be able to accidentally have a surge of strength which causes them to seriously injure another character, and expand that out to all of their dice rolls. There's no reason to make them stop. Just remember that the higher their threshold of success, the more intense their success should be. If your players have gotten some absurd series of explosions and been able to greatly dwarf the target number, make it something epic. Make something intense happen. Maybe something that they didn't intend to happen. And maybe that something isn't entirely for the better. Perhaps a character trying to bash down a door lands just a little too strong on the weakened door frame, not only knocking out the door, but also a section of the wall itself. They in fact have a much larger entrance in, but who knows how much of that wall was stabilizing the remains of this building. Let the dice explode if they want to. It's only going to make your story better. Now on to the specific rules. For Kids on Bikes, we'll talk about the powered characters. Powered characters have a very interesting rule set for their powers. Each of your players will be assigned one of the powers which they'll be able to use in order to have the powered character enact their psychic abilities. However, I do not like to simply give them out. Instead, think about the story that you're telling and write down clues to that power based on the story beats that you're putting into the game. Then have your players, when they believe that one of those clues is applicable to the moment, ask. If you feel that their interpretation of that clue is correct and does point toward this moment, then give them a free activation of that power as the character displays some new and unknown ability. This gives you a way of hinting toward powers which can be used in specific situations to help your characters to push the story forward, without feeling like you're just dropping a fishing line in front of them. Instead, your players need to be actively thinking about these cards and clues that you've given to them. They need to puzzle out the meaning, and then apply it to the situation they're in. For myself, I like to structure them as a poem, so that each power will have a couple lines assigned to it, and then when read all together, it will foreshadow the storyline that is to come. I find that this really increases your players' engagement when it comes to these powered character powers. With Kids in Space, I don't really have a suggestion. Honestly, I'm going to get more into why later when I talk about my feelings on each of these systems, but Teens in Space is unfortunately not going to get a customization from me. Finally, Kids on Brooms. My customization for Kids on Brooms goes along with one that I had already discussed for the general rules, and that is with removing the upper limit. You see, in addition to doing that, with the magic rules, I choose to have the threshold of success matter. In how many stories of young wizards learning to harness their ability do they accidentally attempt to enact a spell, only for it to go horribly wrong due to it performing too well? They put just a little too much power into the magic, and it goes in a chaotic manner, overwhelming the character and probably people around them. This is not the same thing as a botch. A botch is when things go horribly wrong. This is when things go horribly right. So my suggestion here, in addition to removing the explosion limit, is to use a threshold of success table going above the target number for your magic. The higher their threshold, the more powerful the effect they'll be using, but that power might become overwhelming. I use this to great effect in our streamed game, where our chat was able to actually supply their own numbers through a channel reward. This led to some absurd results. Utilizing the rule of exploding dice, almost any number was possible. So when someone chose to have our character roll a 437 when attempting to make a milk cannon out of their wand, that led to some intense magical effect. If we had used the rules of no exploding past the target number and threshold of success doesn't matter for magic, what would have happened is a little burst of milk would have come out of the wand. Instead, what happened is the room that he was in was immediately flooded with milk in a constant stream coming out. It accomplished what he wanted, but due to him horribly over-succeeding, it made the situation a little bit worse, while also solving the problem of the attacking cookie men. So those are some ideas on how you can customize these games to your liking. There are so many different things that you can do with this system. It is so free-form that you're easily able to make your own adjustments to these rules. Those are ones that I have found work well for me. Now let me talk a little bit about what I think of these games. Obviously, I am a fan of these games. If I wasn't, I wouldn't have spent hours upon hours putting out this series of videos. I think that the rules system is very mechanically simple, but leads to a deep amount of roleplay. The world building and character creation that's shared across these three books lends itself to player investment in the world and the game that you're creating. Add into that mechanics which are wholly free form. There are no skills and abilities for you to worry about. There are strengths which give you a few extra perks, but for the most part, everything that your characters are doing is simply going to be assigned to one of these 6 statistics. And that free form flowing of the rules keeps your players from being bogged down in minutia, instead of being able to dive right into the role play, describing their actions rather than simply saying, "I attack." How do you attack? That colors what stat you're going to be using, so it leads to your players being even more creative. If you have players that love to roleplay, they will love these games. But if you have a group where tactical combat is what they're looking for, where they want the mind puzzles of coming at an enemy and figuring out how to defeat it with numbers, abilities, and tactics, this is not really the system for you. You can get some of the tactics, but the numbers are lacking. So if your group is mostly coming for a tactical combat experience, steer clear of these games. But for everybody else, if your players enjoy role-playing and light combat, this series is good for you. And with having 3 different books, there's clearly going to be a genre which appeals to you, and it's easy enough to adapt them into other settings. Like for instance, the Junior Brave Survival Guide to the Apocalypse. We may talk about this in a future video, but this is a setting which is using the Kids on Bikes system in order to create a post-apocalyptic world. There's no reason that you can't do something similar in order to tweak these rules into a setting that you desire. Looking for a superhero game? Use the mechanics of Kids on Brooms to help generate your powers. Do you want more of a medieval fantasy game? Take the alien races from Teens in Space and change it from being science fiction to fantasy. The freedom that these games give you is what makes it a powerful system and series. Now, as for the individual books, Kids on Bikes is my favorite by far. I enjoy the tone and the theme of the game, and I feel like the mechanics lend themselves most strongly to that system over the others. They work for the other systems, but they were clearly built for the Kids on Bikes idea of you being children. The mechanics themselves are things that a child could understand, and it is all centered around a childlike mentality of freedom and creativity. Plus, I'm a sucker for the supernatural adventure genre. Coming in at a close second, however, is Kids on Brooms. While aside from the magic, there's not many differences from Kids on Bikes, the simple addition of the magical mechanics completely changes the tone of the game. Your characters are no longer weak children traveling around with a powered character who is actually able to do some fantastic things. They now are the powered character, and in fact, they're more powerful than any powered character you could create in Kids on Bikes. And this system does a great job of representing that feeling of magical study. I do wish, however, that they went a little bit more into the actual class side of things. They talk about your class schedules a little bit, but they're kind of an optional thing. And I would really like to see a bit more of a robust system for handling the school aspects of this magical university. That is, after all, where we spend most of our time in the Harry Potter books. Moving on from there is Teens in Space. Teens in Space is still a good game. There's no question about that. But I feel like the loose mechanics steps away from the core mentality of a science fiction adventure. Sci-fi is all about facts and math and science, whereas this rule set is more about creativity. This system can be used to tell a good science fiction story, but it's going to lean more toward the fiction than the science. And as a huge nerd who chose to major in mathematics in college, I like the science aspect of it, and that is kind of missing from this game. They have the fantastic futuristic setting, the spaceship, the aliens, but it's missing that layer of science behind it. And I understand why. This is not a system that's meant to represent that kind of granularity, but I find it lacking because of it. Again, I'm not saying Teens in Space is a bad game. It is still a good game, just don't go to it if you're looking for a real hardcore science fiction adventure. Anyway, that about wraps it up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this series has helped you to start your own games in the Kids on Bikes line. If you do, let us know about it in the comments. I'd love to hear about what kinds of games you're running, the weird characters and places that your players have been able to come up with, any customizations that you've done. Have any of these customizations helped you in your own game? Do you disagree with me on my impressions on these games? What was your favorite? What was your least favorite? What's a setting that you would like to see expanded on in a fourth game in this line? Let us know. We'd love to chat with you about it. If you've enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And then maybe come join us on Twitch. We've been streaming some RPGs as well as some video game content, including a recent Kids on Brooms game. So if you'd like to come join in the tabletop action, come join us at twitch.tv/RPGblender. I hope to see you there, but more important, I hope you've enjoyed these videos. Anyway, thank you again, and remember, there's gaming outside the Forgotten Realms.